It is so important for us to think about and to remember the fact that God created us for a reason. And we've talked about this before. God created us to worship Him, to serve Him, to live our lives in honor and in worship of Him. And when we do that, we live out that purpose that He has created us for. But let me just tell you, there's no retirement in that. We don't get to a point and we say, I've served God all that I need to. The rest of this life is mine. We can't do that. And so today I want us to think about, and really what prompted all of this was, if you're a traditional Baptist raised in the Baptist denomination, then you would know that the first Sunday of May is what? Senior Adult Sunday. For those of you who weren't raised in the Baptist denomination, there's such a thing. And that was to happen back at the 1st of May, but we weren't at a place that we could do that. And so we will be having our luncheon today after Bible study. And so we're looking forward to that. And so today I wanted to talk about this idea and really focus on maybe on our more seasoned adults in the room, more wise adults in the room. But it's also for all of us, because we need to have this in mind from the first. It's kind of like I was told when I was in college. I took a finance class, and I don't know why, but I did. And one of the things that they taught us was that if you start early, there is power in compound interest. Have anybody ever heard of that? You start early, and you build, and you grow. It's the same in our lives, in our ministries, in our purpose that God created us for. We don't wait until a certain point to begin serving Him, and we don't get to that point and then say, we're done. And so I wanted us to think about this idea that we need to be thinking about leaving a legacy. And for those of you who are maybe a little further down this journey, down this path than I am, I'm speaking to you, but I'm also speaking to those that are maybe younger than me, to be thinking about the fact that we need to be pouring in to the next generation. We need to be thinking about leaving a legacy. We're not always going to be alive on this earth, and we don't know how long we have. So we need to make the most of every day, leaving that legacy, pouring in to the next generation. So you're going to hear a couple of things, probably a couple of times throughout our time together this morning. First is, you've probably heard me say this before, the title of the sermon is Leave a Legacy. The subtitle is, If You're Not Dead, You're Not Done. That's a little bold, maybe. Maybe it went a little too far. But it's the reality. If you're still taking breath, and I assume by the fact that everyone in here is upright in the pews that I can see, if there's somebody laying over in the pews, I apologize right now. But if you're upright in the pews, you're taking breath. And if you're taking breath, you're not done. Now, I will say, and I'll come to this in just a moment, but there are seasons of ministry. There are seasons of purpose. I can't do all the things I used to could do. I found that out this past week. So we have to figure out what we can do. We'll get to that in just a moment. But I want us to be thinking about this idea of leaving a legacy and the importance of pouring in to the next generation. So you may hear a couple of times this morning, if you're not dead, you're not done. The other thing you may hear more and more again is you can either pout or you can pour. Diane, I'll come to it. I see that wrinkled brow and you don't understand what I'm saying, but I'll get there. You can either pout or you can pour. As I thought about our time together, I thought about the story of Eli. You know the story of Samuel in 1 Samuel chapter 3. And I'm going to read this entire chapter because I think there's a lot here, but I want to focus on two main things that come out of this passage. But you know the passage about Samuel, and he's asleep and he hears the voice Samuel and he goes running to Eli. And so we focus, typically when we read this chapter, we focus on Samuel. And rightfully so. But I want us to hear what Eli had to play in this story. Beginning in verse 1, the boy Samuel ministered Before the Lord, under Eli in those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. One night, Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. Listen to this next verse. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel. Samuel answered, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and he said, "Here I am, you called me." And Eli said, "I didn't call you. Go back and lie down." So he went and lay down. Again the Lord called, "Samuel." And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called." "My son," Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. And the Lord called Samuel a third time. And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. The Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other time, "Samuel, Samuel." Then Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." And the Lord said to Samuel, "See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears it tingle. At that time I will carry out against Eli everything I spoke against his family from beginning to end. For I told him that I would judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about. His sons made themselves contemptible, and he failed to restrain them. Therefore I swore to the house of Eli, the guilt of Eli's house will never be atoned for by sacrifice or offering." Samuel lay down until morning and then opened the doors of the house of the Lord. He was afraid to tell Eli the vision, but Eli called him and said, "Samuel, my son." Samuel answered, "Here I am." "What was it he said to you?" Eli asked. "Do not hide it from me. May God deal with you, be it ever so severely, if you hide from me anything he told you." So Samuel told him everything, hiding nothing from him. Then Eli said, "He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes." The Lord was with Samuel as he grew up, and he let none of his words fall to the ground. And all of Israel from Dan to Beersheba recognized that Samuel was attested as a prophet of the Lord. The Lord continued to appear at Shiloh, and there he revealed himself to Samuel through his word. Now, we hear a lot about Samuel in this text, but I want us to focus on Eli. The first thing that I caught there is even though his sight was failing because he was old, he was the high priest at the temple in Shiloh. And Samuel, if you remember, if we go back in the first and second chapters, Samuel was actually dedicated by Hannah, his mother, who was barren. And when she made basically a commitment to God that if you give me a son, I will dedicate him to you. He will live in the temple. He will serve in the temple all of his days. And so that's how Eli came to take care of Samuel. But along in there, Eli's boys were also working in the temple, and they weren't doing things quite right. In fact, they were doing things that were blasphemous. You can read about that in the first and second chapter as well. And so God said, because of that, they will not follow in your footsteps, Eli. They will not, in fact, so that this will be a sign to you, they will both die on the same day, and none of your family will live to be of old age. Eli served as priest until he was 98 years old. And the day that his sons died, when he heard about it and heard what had happened, he fell off his chair, broke his neck, and he died as well. But here's what I want you to hear about Eli's story. We find here that even though he was up in age and his eyesight was failing, I love the line, I love the phrase, the verse here, the lamp of God had not yet gone out. God was still using Eli. The lamp wasn't out. He still had more to give. He still, even though he couldn't see, he wasn't done. So he poured into Samuel. Samuel grew up in the temple. Samuel went on to do amazing things. Samuel later served as the high priest. He served as a prophet. God used Eli to pour into Samuel, even though Eli was not going to be allowed to have his sons follow in his footsteps. The lamp of God was not yet out. Eli wasn't done. God wasn't done with Eli. Even though his sight was failing, the lamp was still on. The light was still on. If you're here today, as I said a moment ago, either in person or online, if you're taking breath, the light is still on. God is not done with you. The day you give up your purpose and stop is the day you die. Now, some of us may give up and our bodies don't catch up with that giving up for a while, but for all meaningful purpose of life, once we stop, we really lose our meaning, our purpose. Because God created us to serve, and there isn't a retirement to that. The key is realizing that life and ministry and purpose are seasonal. Sometimes we just have to change the way we serve. We may not can do all that we have done in the past. You may have heard me say many times, you can't do everything, but you must do something. Today, I want to edit that a little bit and say, you can't do all you once could, but you must continue to do what you still can. If you're taking breath, God has a plan for you. He has a plan for each of us, every soul. And if we're still alive, our light is still on. God's lamp has not gone out. We still have work to be done. If God is still giving you breath, He still has a plan for you. You have something to offer, a lot to offer. With age comes wisdom. My definition of wisdom is knowledge tempered by experience. Because when I was young, I thought I knew everything. Am I the only one? With experience, I realized I didn't know as much as I thought I did. And please don't burst my bubble, but I hope that you reach kind of a plateau and you don't keep learning that. Because if I keep growing older and older and realize I know less and less, I'm going to maybe be... I pray that we grow in our understanding. But wisdom is this melding of experience with knowledge. And it is so important for us to pour that into the next generation. It is so important for us to realize that this wisdom that we have been given, the experiences that we have had, are meaningful. God uses those to enable us, to equip us, to pour in to the next generation. And you don't have to be in your twilight years of life. This can be for all of us. We need to be working on this legacy that we're going to leave. We're going to have to pour in what we know. Just in the 6 years that I have been here serving with you, we've experienced some things together. We've walked through some difficult times. But God uses those things to equip us to pour into someone else, to minister to others. These experiences that we have to pass them on. And let me just say, everything you have experienced in your life, God can use. God can use to bring honor to Himself and to touch others. As I mentioned, I just got the blessing to spend a few days with my parents. Yesterday morning, my dad is one of 7, but there are 3 remaining. And so yesterday morning at 7 o'clock, I dropped him off to get in the car with his 2 remaining brothers who are still living, and they drove to East Texas where they grew up. They were going to go to see the house that's still standing where my dad was born. Now it's used as a barn, but it's still standing. And they were going to go visit relatives there, and then the little community in East Texas that they grew up in still has a community-wide reunion every year. And so they were going back for this reunion. And as I was driving home yesterday, I dropped him off at 7 and I drove home. I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about these three guys who are all, my dad's the youngest now. So my dad's about to be 79. His other two brothers are older than him. I'll let you do the math. They're in their 80s. And I was thinking about them and what they were going to go experience and the conversations that they would have in the car. My cousin actually drove him, and I hugged him and I said, "Bless you." But I thought about that, and I thought all of the experiences that they have had throughout their life and how that has made them, forged them into the persons that they are today. And you've heard me say before, one day I hope to grow up to be like my dad and my mom. But I think about those experiences in life and the stories that they've told me. How they are still alive, I don't know. But that has made them into the people they are, that they can then turn around and pour into other people. Each of you have that same story. Each of you have been through good times and really difficult times. And God uses all of that to equip you to be able to offer something back. When I think of all the things that we have lived through, we need to realize that we have a lot to offer. You have a lot to offer. If you're not dead, you're not done. You have a lot to offer, but there are seasons. There's no retirement from serving God, but there are seasons. Like I said a moment ago, I realize that I can't do all the things that I used to could do physically. And as I get older, I'm sure that's just going to become more and more. Although when I look at my dad, I don't know. If I have his genes, maybe I'll be able to continue to weld and do all the things he does. His biggest frustration when he had to have a pacemaker was they told him he couldn't weld anymore. That's my dad. Of course, he still does. There are seasons. We may not can do everything that we used to could do, but that doesn't mean we're done. We just have to figure out what we can do. We may not can do all that we could have done, but we still must do what we still can. Another illustration that I'll give you, and this is one a little closer to home. Most of you know this person. Doretta Brown is 97 years old. In less than a month, she will be 98. A couple of months ago, she went back to the Dominican. One of the things I love to hear her say is she will retire when she gets old. Am I right? She's going back again. This is Joanna, her daughter, right here, who the apple didn't fall too far from the tree. I just read her newsletter this morning about how she's still giving her testimony. And now I will tell you, when she started working with groups, coming to the Dominican as a missionary, she walked upstairs, she fed the group, she made the food to feed. She can't do that anymore, not the way she used to, but she still does something. She still serves. She still makes apple pie. Yeah. There are seasons. We just have to realize that we may not can do all that we used to do, but that doesn't mean that we're done. You can choose to pour in to the next generation. You have been equipped with life experience that the next generation needs to learn from. I would go so far as to say, not only do you have a choice, but you have an obligation. We all have an obligation to pour into the next generation. When Moses needed help in Exodus 18, he went to Jethro, and Jethro helped him, gave him advice. We are all leaking pitchers. All of these experiences are held in a clay pot, as Paul would say in 2 Corinthians. All of these, we are like pitchers, but we leak, and if we don't pour it out, it's all just going to be wasted. If we hold it all in, it doesn't benefit. It isn't what God planned. He gives us these experiences, this knowledge, this wisdom to be able to help others, and do that by serving Him. We need to find someone that we can pour into. We need to make the effort to actually do it. We don't quit. I wish I could have found the illustration, but it was something to the effect that when I experience, I guess I won't necessarily technically experience, but when I experience my memorial service, I would like for it to be said that Brian skidded up on 2 wheels into the grave. That idea that you just don't stop, you keep going. There's only one you. Everyone, every individual is completely and utterly unique, just like everyone else. There's only one you, and you offer only what you can offer. So don't hold it in. Be willing to pour it out. God didn't bring you to this point to leave you. You have a lot to offer. So here's your choice. You can pout or you can pour. And you say, well, what do you mean pout? Eli could have pouted. God had already told him, because of your son's blasphemous acts in the temple, you're not going to get to experience the dreams that you had for those boys. They're not going to live long enough for them to serve in the temple as you have served. Your whole lineage is going to die in the prime of their life. And he could have pouted. He could have said, I'm getting old. I can't see. God has already told me what's going to happen. I'm done. He could have. He could have. And you and I might have. But he didn't. When God called out to Samuel, and when Samuel finally figured out it was God, and God said, here's what you need to know. I'm about to do some things in Israel that are going to make the people who hear about it, it's going to make their ears tingle. But all of this is going to happen to Eli's family. Then the next morning, when Eli called Samuel, he said, well, what did he say? Can you imagine having to deliver that message as a boy to your mentor? Well, here's what he said. And Samuel could have been frustrated. Samuel probably was embarrassed. Samuel was probably hurt. But Samuel's response was, He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes. Eli could have pouted. He could have said, Samuel, you know what? You're on your own. You're on your own. God's already told me what's going to happen to me. I'm done. But instead, Eli took the humble route and said, He's the Lord. Let him do as he sees fit in his own eyes. It's not for me to decide. That's God's decision. My role is to continue to do what God's called me to do until I can't do it anymore. And that was to train up Samuel to be the next high priest. He did so with this humility. So he could have chosen to pout. He could have said, Samuel, you're on your own. But he didn't. He said, this is God's plan. This is what God sees that is necessary, and I'm willing to do what He's called me to do. It's the same for us. We can hold on to the past. We can remember the good old days of how we had all of these abilities and these things that we could do, and then just get discouraged and not move forward, not continue to pour into the next generation. So you could pout about getting older and refuse to invest in others. You could say those things that I hear, that I've said myself. What's wrong with the kids today? Nobody said that, huh? You've thought it. We could do that. We can even have the attitude that I've done my part, now it's time for someone else to step up and do their part. Don't even look at me like you've never thought that. I know you have, some of you have, because you've said it to me. We can have that attitude. We can pout. We can say, the good old days are gone, the light's out, I'm done. Or we can choose to pour. We can choose to do like Eli and say, you know what? This is what God wants. So I'm going to choose to live out what He has for me. Maybe the season changes, but we find a way that we can continue to pour. That's how we leave a legacy. If you're not dead, you aren't done. You can either pout or you can pour. Who are you pouring into? Who are you investing in? It starts by making yourself an example, pouring into the next generation, sharing your wisdom, raising up leaders. We could step back and say, you know, I have taught that Sunday school class for 25 years. It's time for somebody else to do it. How about you continue to do it and find someone else that you can train, and then in 3 years step out? How about doing it that way? Have I gone to just stepping on toes now? Well, let me step a little harder. There are more blanks on the VBS sign-up sheet to help than there are filled-in spots. We need help. If you're not dead, you're not done. There's something you can do. This communicates closed. Yeah, that's a bad idea. God has called each of us, each and every one of us, to serve Him, and He has given each and every one of us experience, wisdom, and knowledge. And we are obligated to pour that into the next generation in any way that we can. Maybe we can't do everything that we always did, but we still have to do what we still can. There's no retirement. Legacies are made when we choose to pour. So my challenge for us as we close is very simply, will you pout or will you pour? Choose to leave a legacy. Let's pray together. Father, I thank You for the fact that we are chosen by You to be Your children. And part of that means that You choose us and gift us and create us and give us experiences and all of these things, not so that we can just be a more rounded person, but so that we can pour into the next generation, so that we can leave a legacy. Father, remind us today that if we are still taking breath, that lamp has not gone out. We still have a purpose. And it may not be what it's always been. Maybe it's changing. But it doesn't mean that You're done with us. So remind us of that today. Inspire us today to find ways to pour into the children in our church, to pour into the young adults in our church. And Father, for those who are younger, may they understand, help each of them to understand that there's a lot to be learned from the wisdom in our church family. Continue to use each of us to serve Your purposes and to build Your kingdom. Jesus, it's in Your name we pray it. Amen.